So many desires, or as many desires, so many blankets. Covering the radiance of the Spirit. We have to uncover to discover. We have to uncover, discover. We have to uncover, discover.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Divine Discoveries podcast. This is your host, Prat Pai, and I also have Vikram in the house. So today we have a lot to talk about, and we're going to continue on with our Karma series. So I'd like to go ahead and get started with our prayers because we have a lot to get to. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sadguru Maharaj Ki Jai. Harihi Om. Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Sarvamangalamangallye Shive Sarvarthasadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute. Om Dum Durgaye Namaha. Om Aim Saraswatye Swaha. Om Shri Mahalakshmi Namaha. Om Shri Mahakalikaye Namaha. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mokshi Yamamritat. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha. Om Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Pandurangaya. Om Apadam Apahartaram Dataram Sarvasampadam Lokabhiramam Shri Ramam Bhuyo Bhuyo Namamyaham. Shri Rama Jai Rama Jai Jai Rama. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanurmardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Shri Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. Om Klim Krishnaya Namaha. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Thank you, everyone, and once again for joining us. And I'd like to turn it over to Vikram so he can tell any of our new listeners how they can connect with us.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Prat. Thank you all for joining us and for listening to us. As always, we appreciate your support and encouragement and feedback. You can definitely share this also with your friends and family, but we can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, just to name a few. So please spread far and wide. Please like, comment, subscribe, encourage others to do so. And folks can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook as well. So please do that.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you to all our listeners who have been supporting us. Please continue to do so and rate our podcast as well, please. I would appreciate that. We would appreciate that. We're continuing on with our Karma series. We spoke about, the basics of karma. And we also spoke about death and how the soul experiences an afterlife. And before we go on to our topic for today, which is the descent of the soul into rebirth, I wanted to take a question that we got from one of our listeners, which is something we don't get all the time. So I'm really excited about it. So the listener, his name is Deep Quatra. He's a good friend of mine, and we're actually gym buddies. So he's kindly been one of our consistent listeners. And the question that he posed is, I have to say the death episode was my favorite. I was truly amazed at how thoughtfully and sensitively you handled such a deep topic. It was really impactful. That said, it also raised a question in my mind. What happens in cases where the last rites are not performed? For example, someone who is an orphan or someone who dies in an accident like an avalanche where the body is never recovered, or even someone who goes missing and the family is unsure whether they are alive or not, and therefore cannot perform the rites. In such situations, does it mean that the afterlife body you described does not fully form or reach its intended destination? Does that leave the spirit in some kind of limbo? That's a pretty good question. I'm sure a lot of people may also wonder about the same thing. So, Deep, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. So, here's my answer based on the Manusmriti and the Garuda Puran. What it says is that, if you're unsure of whether someone is alive or not, I think after a certain period of time, if they don't show up, I'm just saying in that particular scenario, you're probably safe to assume that they're no longer with us. And at that point, you can probably go ahead and do the final rites if that individual has a son or any family members that are surviving them. However, in the situation where there's an accident or, like he said, there was an avalanche or somebody dies in an accident and say their body's not recovered or not found, but, I think I would like to say that in today's world, there's probably a good chance that they are able to find the body. But the question really is that if the rites are not performed, what happens to that soul, right? And that's an important question because there are a lot of people who may die and they don't have successors, right? So what happens in that scenario is such an individual cannot escape the results of their karmas. So even if you as the successor don't do the final rites or for that soul's benefit, then that soul is still going to get that astral body formed by the graces of the demigods, because one must experience the afterlife, either go to the pious realms or go to the hellish realms. They have to experience the results of their actions. So whatever they earn, there's nothing that's going to stop them from experiencing the results of that. So I hope that answers your question. But what I do want to say in addition to that is, what is the benefit ultimately for the soul if one does perform the funeral rites or the final rites based on the Shastras with the sincerity and respect and love for that individual? Is that, if you remember, I had mentioned that 1 year trek that soul has to make to Yamraj's court. They have 16 checkpoints, or you can say exits or little rest areas that they get, right? And these pindadan, or the food offerings that are symbolic, are actually supposed to provide nourishment and rest and some sort of a battery recharge for that soul to make the journey smoother, if that makes sense. I would say take a worldly view of it, right? It's very hot outside. We like to cool off and go inside. We like to eat and drink something, and then we recharge and then we go back, right, on our journey. So that's the kind of shade or relief that the soul receives on that trek when you're doing this funeral rites. So it's not that they can't do the trek without it, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for the soul. So if anything, you're doing that soul a favor by giving them that rest, relaxation, recharging of the battery, so to speak, so that they can get through that trek smoothly. And the funeral rites can be done once a month in the first year. I don't know if that's still followed, but I believe that's what can help that soul through the trek, like I said, for that 1 year, the first year. And then after that, at some point, that soul will probably be reborn, which we're going to talk about today. And if you're still doing it on an annual basis on the tithi or the anniversary, death anniversary happens, then that'll continue to provide blessings and good wishes. And I'm sure a lot of good things can still come to that soul, even if they're reborn in this world again. So that's the reason why our Shastras highly encourage these funeral rites to be done. Now, do the funeral rites have to be done only by a son? No. There may be people who die who have daughters. Daughters can do it in that situation, or it can be even your wife. And if nobody exists for that person, even a loving, close friend can step in and do the shraddh or funeral rites for that soul. So if anybody does it, it can still benefit that soul in a similar manner. So I hope that answers the question. And I'd like to move on to our topic today, which is descent of the soul. Whenever that soul is eligible to be reborn, as per its karmas, and it has to find a matching family or matching set of parents. So since we're talking about the soul's descent and birth on earth, or rebirth, if you will, reincarnation, or one of the verses from the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 15. Of course, chapter 2 is where Lord Krishna speaks a lot about the soul and its nature and the fact that it's eternal and the body dies, but the soul does not. But chapter 15, verse 8 says, "As the air carries fragrance from place to place, so does the embodied soul carry the mind and senses with it when it leaves an old body and enters a new one." So I think that really leads in really well, Vikram, to have you speak about this concept of reincarnation or rebirth or punarjanam, as it's called. And, you know, I've heard, just like people have near-death experiences where they experience for some short period of time, it feels like they're dead. They kind of go to some other realm and it's not their time, so they come back, right? So similarly, there are people who are born or reborn, I should say, and they somewhere remember their past. And even it's been proven true. I believe you researched something along these lines.
Yes, I have a couple of modern examples. Before I talk about them, even if you look at our, history, if you look at Mahabharata, for instance, there's a clear case of reincarnation right there with Amba and Shikandi, right?
Yeah.
Amba vows to be the cause of Bhishma Pitama's death after he is unable to marry her due to his vow to be a brahmachari. And so subsequently, she is reborn as Shikandi and is in the form of a man, though Bhishma recognizes her as that, and so he refuses to fight her, and she acts as a kind of shield to Arjun in the Mahabharata war, and Arjun is thus able to defeat Bhishma and put him on the bed of arrows. So that's kind of even at that time, there are instances of that. But if you look at, modern cases, there are, many examples. I'll mention two in particular that I thought were fairly interesting and caught my eye. So one of them is the story of Shanti Devi, as she's known. She was born in India, in Delhi in 1926. She passed away in 1987, but she is best known as being a case of reincarnation. So, basically, what happened with her is that when she was 4 years old, she began to tell her parents that Delhi was not her real home. Her home was in Mathura, which is about 100 miles away from Delhi, right? And when she described this to them, she was using words and even saying things in a dialect which is not Delhi lingo, so to speak, right? And for a 4-year-old to do that, I mean, you can't even just learn that in school or anything just like that. It takes time to learn any dialect. So that's when this started. And, furthermore, she talked about who her husband was. She talked about the color of his glasses. She even talked about how her home in her previous life was, with very specific details like, this is what the floor was like, this was the layout of the home. And she even recalled some wishes that she made in her previous life at the time of her death. So, yeah, and this case got a lot of national attention. Even so, it caught the attention of Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi put together a committee of 15 people to investigate this. So this committee traveled with Shanti Devi to Mathura. And when they got there, she was able to navigate through the whole location, knew where everything was, knew what all the landmarks were, and even was able to successfully find out, or to point out who her in-laws were and her husband from her
Wow.
past life. And interestingly, her husband from her previous life, when she saw him, he tried to trick her. He said that, oh, I'm not that. I am, his brother. But there was a money that she had hidden away in her previous life, which only her husband knew, and she was able to point that out to him, in which case, he confirmed that. So in her previous life, she died when she was only 23, 10 days after she gave birth. But this is just one example of a, of a case like this. And the committee that had been appointed, they came to the conclusion after seeing all this that she was indeed the reincarnation of the person that she said. And, she never married in her life as Shanti Devi. But this is kind of one example. The other one is also pretty interesting. And this is the story of Titu Singh Toran.
Hmm.
So he was 4 years old as well. And, you know, when he was young, he displayed like a lot of knowledge and awareness about things that was unusual for a child that young. So around 4 years old, that was noticeable. But actually, even before that, when he was 18 months old, he asked his grandfather to take care of his wife and children that are in Agra, not in the location where he lived. So that was a very odd statement for an 18-month-old to say, right? But then as he grew older, he had started to show a lot of disdain for the way that his current family lived. He didn't like the way his mother dressed. He felt his father lived too modestly. And he said that, I had a big house and a huge shop, and I lived a life of luxury. This is not what I'm used to. And sometime later, he said that he had a shop of transistor radios and that he was a big smuggler. And so once all these things started coming out, his brother and the brother's friend looked for that shop and met a woman who was the widow of another smuggler from that area. So when they took Titu there, he recognized all of them and he gave a very detailed recounting of that the widow's husband that they were meeting with. So that stunned everybody. He described their home, described the children, even mentioned certain details about that smuggler's death. The way that he described it and the traits and all that were actually very similar to the smuggler that had died. And so the pieces started to come together that perhaps he was actually the reincarnation of that smuggler actually.
Hmm.
He had a small circular birthmark on his right temple, which resembled a bullet wound, and some marks on the back of his skull, similar to exit wounds. And these marked the same locations where the smuggler had his injuries, but he died from.
Wow.
And then I mentioned that his behavioral traits were similar, and one very, very interesting aspect of this, which is a little goosebump inducing, if not already, this isn't goosebump inducing.
Yeah.
But that smuggler had died on August 28th, 1983, while little Titu's birth date, there's some discrepancy whether he was born December 11th, 82 or December 10th, 83. Now, with this discrepancy, this raises another kind of key question about the soul, which is that a body may have had a soul, but then that soul got replaced by another shortly after birth. And this is a Hindu concept known as Prakya Pravesh.
Hmm.
So if the first birth date is accurate, then that means that the original soul was replaced by the smugglers after D2 actually had an illness at 8 months old.
Yeah.
So this was also a world famous case, and he has since grown up, and he's leading a normal life, we could say.
Okay.
But these are just two examples, Pratt, of reincarnation.
Wow. So, I noticed that, it may just be coincidental that you found the two that were interesting that you told us about that were like from people who were born in India. But I'm just wondering, did you, in your research, come across any that were from other countries outside of India?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of examples of that even in the US.
Hmm.
I can mention a couple of those to you. In Oklahoma, for instance, there's a 5-year-old boy where he talked about, I'm a Hollywood extra and I'm a talent agent. And he talked about details of that past life, living in Hollywood, dancing, having numerous wives. When researchers started to look at this, they actually were able to trace all of those details to a particular man named Marty Martin.
Wow.
So likely was an incarnation of that. There was another gentleman from Louisiana. When he was 2 years old, he started to have nightmares of being shot down in a plane.
Hmm.
And he correctly recalled that he was a World War II pilot whose aircraft was shot down by the Japanese near Iwo Jima. And even in a place like Brazil, there was a 9-year-old boy who detailed a lot of memories of his granduncle who was killed in the 90s. The boy had a specific indent in his skull, which corresponded exactly to a wound that the granduncle suffered, along with similar traits. So he may have
Wow.
been a reincarnation of that. So yes, there are
Yeah.
examples not just in India, but
Yeah.
in other
Yeah.
places as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked that is because a lot of people can say, oh, is this only like an Indian phenomenon? Or is
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
and furthermore, there's a lot of people who are skeptical about reincarnation. They're not quite sure whether this is really true. Even if the example that you gave from the Mahabharata, people can say, oh, that was a completely different time. We don't even know if that happened. So a lot of people want to question this whole doctrine of reincarnation and say, what's the proof of it in today's modern times? So I'm
Right.
really thankful to you for presenting these examples of people who are living in the 20th century, 21st century. This is the time period in which we're sort of existing, So we're hearing about individuals who across the world are having some sort of, remembrance or visions of their past life. And this is definitely eye-opening, right? It definitely, furthermore, it hits home that this is not something you want to consider something that's just a made-up kind of phenomenon.
Right. And I think that, the most fascinating thing, reincarnation for us that are Hindu, I mean, we've heard about it since the beginning, right? So to talk about it is, it's fairly normal in a sense. But, reading a little more about it, and especially the point that I brought up about one soul being replaced by another during the process, which is an actual, there's like a Hindu terminology for it. That's pretty fascinating. I think one question I would just, that popped into my mind that I would just kind of pose just generally is, as to perhaps why that type of system is happens, why a soul can replace another one. When generally our concept is that okay, you lead a life, you do certain karma, and then based on that, you are reincarnated into the next thing. But what do you do if you are reincarnated into the next thing and another pushes you? Like, how does that work? I mean, I think that that's a very fascinating question that
Yeah.
didn't really occur to me until I read about this.
I would say that's a very, very rare instance, but sounds very interesting and very intriguing for sure. So we might want to research that a little bit further and try to dig a little deeper into seeing what could lead to that happening. You know, uh,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
very unique circumstance there. But I think that it's interesting that many of these situations where one can remember their past life, their immediate past life, right? And then they're tracing it back. People are actually trying to see whether they're telling the truth. They get dreams or nightmares, or they get visions of something, or they're able to clearly remember what their past life was all about, and they can even specifically tell you details that you can trace down. To me, as far as if I remember correctly, I think Guruji said something in the video, in one of his lectures, where he said that if someone has an untimely death or something that it's like they're not ready, and something, death comes upon them suddenly, and they have strong desire or something to fulfill that they had in their mind, and that was their last conscious thought, then many a time those are the ones that have immediate rebirth. Like I said, most of the souls don't have immediate rebirth. They have all this afterlife that they have to experience, and then they come back. But there are a few instances where people do come back quickly, and I think in those instances, they can remember the tragic way that they died or something, which kind of makes sense because most of us don't remember anything about our previous life.
Right. And actually, I'll share something which I haven't really shared before with anyone, but I'm told this, that when I was 2.5, 3 years old, that I told my grandparents about my past life.
Oh,
I have no recollection of this at all,
okay.
but the only thing I remember is, or that they told me that I said was that I used to reside on a mountain and that I was a spiritual person of some sort, meaning not like, I don't know if that means like a yogi type of person or a
Hmm.
pandit type of person or what, but something like that. And I used to feed the poor. That's what I said.
Wow.
But I have no recollection of sharing this, but I'm going based off of what my grandparents told me. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Well, I think there may be some merit to the idea that those who are somehow able to see their past life, it's probably in their childhood somewhere that they have that recollection. Maybe if they're
Yeah.
once that time passes, they even forget that, maybe they.
Right. Yeah.
So
I don't have any recollection of it, but the fact that
yeah,
my grandparents told me means that I must have said, and I was 2.5, 3 years old. So,
unbelievable. That's pretty cool,
yeah.
man. You're a special
Yeah.
soul.
Yeah. I wish I remembered more, but also probably for the best, I don't.
Yeah, sure, sure. So Vikram, taking this forward, what do most people identify themselves as?
I mean, when you talk to most people, I mean, they just think of themselves as whatever body they're in.
Right.
They don't think of the inner mechanism by which they're operating.
Correct. Correct. But along with this body that we have two other bodies at the same time. So there's a combination of three bodies that makes up who we are. And I'd like to expand on that. So the three, they're called sharir. Sharira means body in Sanskrit, right? So the shariras are sthula sharira, which is the gross physical body, which is what most people identify with, right? This is what I look like. This is what I sound like. And then you have the sukshma sharira. Okay, that means the subtle or astral body. So that is actually within this body. So within the gross body lies the astral body, right? And it's more subtle than the gross body because you can't really see the astral body. But that's called the sukshma sharira. And the most subtlest of them all, the third one, is called the causal body, which is called karana sharira. Okay? So every human being has these three bodies all at the same time. So when the soul departs a physical body after death, its astral body and causal body go with it. Okay? So let me describe all three of these bodies a little more in detail. So the gross body, or the sthula sharir, is our physical body, which is made up of the five elements, or pancha mahabhutas. We've talked about this: air, ether, water, fire, and earth. Okay? Those five elements. And this physical body, obviously, is our vehicle to be able to function in this world, right? It gives us the ability to experience pleasure, pain, the pairs of opposites, and all these things, right? And actually, this physical body is also given to us because of our good karma. This human body, I should say. It's not something that's guaranteed to all the souls. So it's a great opportunity, obviously, to progress spiritually, as we've spoken about. And then the subtle body, called the astral body also, is the non-physical vehicle of experiencing this world, right? So what it carries is mind, the intellect, impressions from previous lives called vasanas, or samskars, like we spoke about in the karma episode. And then our senses. It also carries the life force, right? For this body to be functioning and functioning normally, there's something called prana, right? So we spoke about that in the Hanuman episode also, right, where we spoke about prana. So I do want to go into detail a little bit about the sukshma shari and what it consists of. The five senses of knowledge called the jnanendriyas. What are they? Hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Okay, so those five. Then the five senses of action, or karmendriyas. They are speech, hands for grasping or touching or grabbing something, feet for actually moving or traveling, excretion, and reproduction. So these are our five senses of action or karma. And we also have the five vital airs, or I should say energies, pranas, right? So I just mentioned prana. And a lot of people think that prana only means our breath, right? As long as we're breathing, that's prana. That's part of it. So if you think about it, the prana means also like vitality, right? Energy. And, we have different levels of energy. Sometimes we're tired, sometimes we're energetic, sometimes we're fresh. We wake up and we're like springing out of bed, excited about whatever. And sometimes we're just so lethargic. We feel sick sometimes. Sometimes we're feeling very healthy. We're feeling very rejuvenated. So all these are fluctuations of our vital energies, the pranas, right? So that's part of it. But then there's a lot of other functions that are happening in the body, which we spoke about in the Hanuman episode also. And those pancha pranas, or five pranas, have different functions that to make this body operate normally, right? So prana, for example, the word prana itself means inward or upward breathing energy, okay? Apana, which it means elimination or downward energy. Vyana means circulation throughout the body, so good oxygen circulation, blood circulation. Udana is upward moving energy linked with speech and death. And the last one is samana, which is digestion and assimilation. So without all of these 5 pranas, we cannot operate, or we can't have normal body functions. So these are all part of that subtle body. And lastly is the antakarana, or the inner instruments that we use daily, which is man, or manas, which is mind, right? Thoughts and ideas that come to us. Our mind tends to be very scattered because we think about, tens of thousands of thoughts every day. But where we actually take those thoughts forward and act upon them is where we use buddhi, or intellect, right? So where we're able to rationalize something, or make sense of something, or maybe weigh the pros and cons of 2 different options that we have in life, and we say, okay, I'm going to choose this one. So that's where we use our intellect, right? Our higher mind. So the mind and the intellect, it's actually one entity that's kind of doing 2 different functions. So the spiritualists call the lower mind, or the monkey mind, because it's restless all the time. But it's usually when you're able to kind of calm down and say, okay, what is my next step going to be? And if I have to choose between 3 things to do, then let me use my rationale, my good decision-making processes to then make that choice, right? So that's where we use the intellect. Some traditions stop right there with 17, right? So we have the 5 karmendriyas, the 5 jnanendriyas, and the 5 pranas, and then they have manas, mind, and buddhi, intellect. But some traditions include 2 more, which is ahankar, the ego, right? Which gives us the sense of I and mine and the attachments and everything. This belongs to me. So that is the ego, ahankar. And then the last one is called chitta, which is the storehouse of memory and impressions, right, of the past. And it's not just past, like in the sense like memory from previous lives necessarily. It's also things that have happened to us in this lifetime that stay in our mind and has created an impression. And whenever we come across similar situations, it may traumatize us or it may excite us. So we could go through either one of those kinds of emotions. So the astral body is made up of all of these things, right? Which are more subtle than what you can physically see and touch. And then lastly, we have the Karana Sharir, which is the causal body. And what that is it's something that's very, very subtle and underlying. In the Vedantic model of these 3 bodies, the causal body, or the Karana Sharir, which we're talking about now, it's not made up of any physical matter or even a subtle matter or any substance. What it contains is seeds of karma and impressions. Like I said, these latent impressions and vasanas and samskars and stuff. And whatever has to manifest as prarabdha karma in this life. Like, remember I said there's a storehouse of karma out of which only a certain percentage will be experienced in this life. So whatever amount is supposed to be experienced in this life, it's hard-coded into the Karana Sharir, which is the causal body. So it's like, just like if you want to think about it like planting a seed for an apple tree, the seed itself contains the design for what the tree is going to manifest into, what it's going to look like, right? So similarly, there are seeds of karma that are going to manifest at some point during the life that are already hard-coded into the blueprint, if you will, which is the causal body. And from that causal body, the astral body is formed, right? As per the blueprint, the software is created, which is the astral body. So the astral body is the software. And what the software needs to work with to make everything appear or manifest in physical form is the gross body. So you see how these 3 are interconnected? So it's pretty interesting that we identify with this body, we don't realize that there's two other bodies that are functioning along with this gross body. And when you're on the spiritual path, eventually you can feel the presence of the causal body. The astral body and the gross body are what we're in touch with almost every day. So on a daily basis, we don't think about the astral body, but we rely on it because we use our mind, we use our intellect, we have our pranas, the air, vital energy flowing in and out through our body. Taking this one step forward, not only do we have the three bodies, but we also have 5 sheaths. You know what a sheath is?
Like a protective kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like a covering.
Like a covering.
Yeah. So like what I always think about when I think about a sheath is like a sword. You know, the sword has a cover that you put it inside, right? So we have what we call Kośas, also aligning with the 3 bodies that I just described, right? These Kośas are called the 5 sheaths, okay? And they're like layers, if you want to consider it like peeling an onion, you know? Or like Guruji says in our intro, you have to uncover to discover. So our Atman, or our soul, what we truly are, is hidden underneath all 3 of these bodies, which also are linked to these 5 blankets or layers that are covering the soul, the pure consciousness, right? So they're called Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha. Okay? These are the 5. And I started with Annamaya Kosha because it's the one that we can easily see and identify with, just like the gross body. That's why this one aligns with the gross body. The Annamaya Kosha, Anna means food. And this sheath is basically made up of not just the 5 elements that I mentioned, you know, but also the food that we consume. So the skin that we have, the muscles, the tissue, the bones, the blood, all that stuff is all thanks to what we're eating and drinking, which then processes into what our body is. Okay? So that's the one that we can physically see, the Annamaya Kosha. Okay? The one below that, subtler than that, is called Pranamaya Kosha. So we spoke about the 5 pranas and all its functions, all the body functions, the vitality that we have. So that's what constitutes the second sheath. Okay? Manomaya Kosha. Now we're on to the subtler, we're getting subtler with each sheath now. We're going deeper inward. And this sheath, Manomaya Kosha, is the mental sheath. And that deals with all the functions of the mind, the thoughts, the emotions, the feelings, memory, imagination, and all the experiences that we had, like I said, the impressions that stay in our head, that constitutes the Manomaya Kosha. Okay? And then the Vijnanamaya Kosha. Now, Vijnana in this particular instance means the intellectual sheath. Okay? And this helps us reason, rationale, like try to, like I said, weigh the pros and cons, try to analyze something, use our intuition. And it also helps us develop vivek. In Sanskrit, viveka means the power of discrimination. So to understand what is right and wrong, what is temporary and what is permanent in a spiritual sense, right? So this is where we use all this wisdom that we have. As we're getting closer and closer to where the Atman really is, this intellectual sheath really helps us get closer to finding the Atma within ourselves. So it helps use all this wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Vedas, from the Upanishads, and all this stuff in using meditation and various other techniques to go deeper into the seeking of bliss and pure consciousness. And then we come to the final, as I said, bliss, here comes the Anandamaya Kosha, which is the bliss sheath. This is where we experience joy, bliss, happiness, which is free of the ego. Okay? So this isn't like selfish happiness. Like, oh yes, I got I'm a millionaire. Not like that. This is like you're feeling true contentment from within. Okay? And this can be experienced during deep sleep. Okay? So we experience this probably every day, maybe for shorter periods of time than we used to because we're aging now. They say actually as you age, the deep sleep, restful sleep goes down in duration. So obviously it's a dreamless state also. So we don't dream about anything, we don't remember anything about it. So there's no consciousness of who you are or what you're experiencing, what you're dealing with. That's something that you would experience in your dream state, where you could dream about your problems or something from the past, or some strange incidents may happen in your dream state. But in this dreamless state where we experience deep sleep, there's no disturbance during that time, and there's no sense of ego at all or anything. You're not, even if you're sad about something in your life or you're dealing with something really bad, in the deep sleep, you forget all that.
You know that all-important business meeting you have the next morning at 9 a.m. where you have to introduce a new product to your clients and millions are writing on it? None of that will matter to you when you're in deep sleep.
Because you're not even conscious of anything. And I guess that is, like I said, one way of experiencing the Anandamaya Kosha or the bliss sheath. But the higher spiritual form of that is called samadhi. So when one can meditate and go to a very, very, very deep level of meditation, and they say the kundalini or the spiritual energy is going through the chakras in your body, all the way up to your crown chakra in the back of your head, that is when you have experienced that ego-free bliss through meditation. So these are the 5 koshas. Now, as I said, the Annamaya kosha is aligned with the gross body, the stula sharir, right? The next 3, Pranamaya kosha, the vital energy sheath, the Manomaya kosha, the mental sheath, and the Vijnanamaya kosha, which is the intellectual sheath. These 3 align with the astral body. Okay? As I said, vital energy, mind, intellect, all of that comes under the astral body. And this Anandamaya kosha, the bliss sheath, it aligns with the causal body, which is the subtlest of all of them. Okay? But then the question comes, obviously we know theoretically that we're the soul. We haven't experienced that, or we haven't realized that yet, right? But we hope that we can realize that at some point, hopefully in this lifetime if possible. What the scriptures tell us about the soul is who we are is unchanging, right? And it's not something, with the body, what we do is we experience things, right? We taste something, we smell something, we see something, we get joy or pleasure, or sometimes not such pleasurable experiences out of it, right? So what we're experiencing is not us. We're the experiencer, right? So that's where people need to understand, like, why we're not the body. Because the body, from birth till death, goes through a lot of changes. And we're considered a changeless principle, if you will, right? So we don't undergo changes at a soul level, but the body undergoes a lot of changes. At one time you were so young, and now you're older, your body is closer to death, and it's probably, you may be dealing with an illness or something, you may be weaker, more feeble. You don't have the energy that you used to. So that goes to show how the changing aspects cannot be us, right? So the next one is the same thing, like prana, right? Like I said earlier, you feel sick, and then once you recover from that, you feel like a new person. And then at some point, the same thing, the fluctuations of energy levels within the body make us go through different experiences. But we're experiencing those things. It's not us. So same thing, again, the pranas are changing. Our mind keeps changing, the Manomaya kosha. Our mind is constantly changing. Our sensibility changes. Sometimes people identify with their personalities. maybe not with their body, and they say, this is the kind of person I am. This is the way I think, right? But things can happen in life where your sensibility or your ideologies change. So if anything is subject to change, then that doesn't constitute you. So you can't identify it as yourself at that point. So all of these koshas represent something that is going to change. Okay? So that's the reason why these are all aspects of our life. These are all tools or resources or what our existence contains. But at the same time, we are the subtlest energy that actually gives life to all of these koshas, if you will. Okay? So the soul is considered, same as God, something that's eternal, something that is real, and something that is pure consciousness, right? And that's how God is, Brahman is described by the Vedas. So that's pretty much what our true nature is as well. But it takes time for us to get through these layers to finally realize and be one with our true nature. An interesting example that I came across one Swami had given, how one should look at the soul, because the soul is actually giving life to these three bodies. The soul is giving life or illumination to these five sheaths, right? Is when you if you want to make water sweet, what do? You add a spoon of sugar to it, right? The same thing, if you want to make milk sweet or any other liquid sweet or any food sweet, you add sugar to it, because sugar is that main element of sweetness. Whereas sugar itself, you don't need to add sugar to it to make sugar sweet. So the soul is that energy that is really supplying the energy to all of these three bodies and the five sheaths. So Vikram, did you know any of this?
Yeah, I was going to say, no, I didn't know any of this. This was truly something new for me. And you know, it's funny how everything is thought of as being very simplistic, but there's a lot of layers to it. There's a logic to it all. And to me, that just I feel that just lends even more credence to the fact that there is a divine.
Yeah.
Because these things don't just exist in a vacuum.
Right.
So yeah, this is very interesting and definitely new to me. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm sure to many of our listeners also this is a new concept as well.
Yeah, it may be to some of them for sure. And a couple more things I want to mention before we get to Guruji's video is with these five sheaths, right? It's important, like we eat healthy, we keep our body healthy, the sthul sharir, the gross body. So how do we keep these sheaths in good balance? These koshas in good balance. So for that, the Annamaya kosha, a healthy diet, of course, the Vedic scriptures will tell you a sattvic diet is always best to keep this kosha in good condition. For the pranamaya kosha, for the vital energies of your body, they say pranayam, where you close one nostril and breathe in and then hold it for a second and then close that nostril and then breathe out from the other nostril. That rhythmic breathing and deep breathing techniques, which a lot of, I think, Art of Living, is very famous for, teaching great meditation techniques and breathing techniques. That helps channel all your pranas and keep them in good balance so that they're not out of balance. Because when pranas are out of balance, that's when you tend to feel sick, tired, and all the negative energies, negative feelings, right? For the mind, the manomaya kosha, great practice is mantra sadhana or japa or any sort of bhakti practice like kirtan or anything like that, right? That can kind of purify your mind. Meditation is also a great practice for that. And the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the intellect kosha, for that one to be in good balance, self-inquiry, asking these very important questions about your existence. Who am I? Why am I here? Those kind of questions we've talked about before. You take that inquiry deeper and actually study the scriptures to find out the answers that you're seeking, or from a guru, right? So once you have that wisdom and you're looking for those answers, you're keeping your intellect in good condition, that intellect sheath. And for the bliss sheath, like I said, the samadhi state is where you can really experience that. And that can only be experienced with a lot of practice of deeper and deeper and deeper meditation and kundalini yoga. Kundalini, once again, is the spiritual energy like that starts from the base of your spine all the way to the crown of your head. And they say there are 7 invisible chakras along our spine. So this kundalini shakti or energy is supposed to be able to pierce through all those chakras in order for us to feel that state of samadhi when it reaches our crown of our head. So that's when we experience samadhi. That's when we are keeping that anandamaya or the bliss kosha in good condition. So I wanted to mention those things as well so that people can start thinking about that. You know, what can I do actively to get in touch with these sheaths, and not just get in touch with these sheaths, but when you're trying to keep them in good balance, what you're doing is you're actually progressing down the right path for realizing yourself. And just wanted to mention also, in addition to that we have 4 states of consciousness, our mind, our mental states of consciousness. So when we're right now, like what we're doing right now, we would call ourselves in the Jagrit state, which means wakeful, conscious state, right? So the Jagrit avastha, which I just mentioned, is connected to the gross body, things we actually do with the body when we're awake. The second state of consciousness is called swapna, or the dream state, which we spoke a little bit about earlier. Obviously, our gross body is not doing anything other than just laying down, but our subtle body, our astral body, is experiencing the dream, right? So that's why it's linked to the dream state. The next one is called sushupti state, which is linked to the causal body, the third one. And that is when we experience deep sleep, as I said, right? And the last one, where we realize ourself or our true nature, is called turiya. So that is transcendental state. Okay? So when we transcend all these bodies, all these sheaths, we have no ego, and we're completely one with the divine, that is called turiya. So we have Jagrit, Swapna, Sushupti, and Turiya. So these are our 4 states of consciousness. So I wanted to mention this because these are all aspects of our existence in this world that we don't think about unless we get into spiritual seeking. And since this is a spirituality-based podcast, I felt this is a perfect episode where we're talking about rebirth, and rebirth as a human, where all these aspects can sort of be understood. Some of them are a little bit hard to comprehend, in the sense you may not be able to quite understand what it is, but you can experience it when you go deeper and deeper into your spiritual sadhana. That's when you can experience the subtlest of all, which is our true being, the Atman. And I want to give credit to all the sources where these concepts of the 5 koshas and the 4 states of consciousness and the 3 bodies, where all of these are highlighted and spoken about very prominently. Taittiriya Upanishad, which comes from the Krishna Yajurved, the Mandukya Upanishad, which comes from the Atharva Ved, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which comes from the Shukla Yajurved, Chandogya Upanishad, which comes from the Samaved, And some of the Advaita commentaries, scriptures that Adi Shankaracharya had composed, which were called Tattva Bodha and Viveka Chudamani, based on what he understood from the Upanishads. So this is all amazing, amazing information that comes from the Vedas, the most ancient texts. So it's incredible. It really tells us about the reality of our existence. So on that note, I'd like to play one part of Guruji's video. I'll be playing the second part at the very end.
Life is for research. It humbles you. I think it is an eternal quest of what is soul and how we come here, why we come here and all is an eternal quest. Valagra shatabhagasya. Shvetashvatara Upanishad declares. Valagra shatabhagasya. Vala means, one hair from your head. If you pluck one hair from your head, and shatabhagasya means if you split it into 100 parts, and take that 100th part and again divide it through some machinery, again 100 times. That will be the size as if the size of your soul. That pinpoint blue light which holds all this together. It only means that explanation is given only to say that soul is extremely subtle. So the soul, which is already holding on to the dominating thought with which it has left this body, will be attracted by those parents who have to prepare a body for that soul. And all those conjecture of the planets as per the soul's karma. Thus it descends. From any loka, the good deeds which has taken it to other higher lokas, from there, after the exhaustion of their karma, punya kshine martya loke vishanti, it comes back. Through the moon, through the rain, through the grain. Certain things are impossible to believe. At the same time, certain types of food which the parents partake, invisibly, the soul entering into the parents, entering into a particular teeny sperm with its astral body, with its causal body, with all the thought currents, with ego, with selfishness, with several types of problems in the psyche. With all these things, a Hitler, a Gandhi, with all that energy to destroy humanity or resurrect humanity, the soul is right there in that sperm. Birth is not just when the baby is born on earth. When it has entered into that teeniest sperm, that is its first birth. And in one coming together of the man and woman, millions of sperms are ejaculated. Among them, one sperm alone, containing a Hitler or Gandhi or you or me, directly penetrates into the egg. The sperm entering into the ovum is really the birth happening in this body. And within moments, the wonder of the creation begins. Oh, you talk about virgin birth and this miracle and that miracle. Every moment the miracle of God is taking place. Every birth is a miracle. Of course. Within 24 hours, its name in Sanskrit, it's called Kalila, cell formation. So, that one cell immediately dividing, subdividing, and go on dividing, creating 200 billion cells in this human body. How many?
200 billion.
Each cell, even though very coordinating with other cells, each cell is completely an independent individual in this body. It has its pentagon, its military, its medicine, its breathing, its receiving of the vitamin, nutrients. Oh yes, all nutrition, everything. Each cell is breathing. Within a week's time, this Kalila, the cell, becomes Budbuddha. Means, it is going to take the shape, it's going to take the shape of a berry fruit. In 2 weeks, it's going to be round like a ball. It's known as Pinda. Kalila, Budbuddha, Pit. And thereafterwards, you see how the second month, the third month, the fourth month, how the head and all that formation, it is protected from all sides. Jarayu, amnion, is constantly weightless, like the brain. Just like the brain, in that liquid, weightless, this Parabrahma and this Jivatma, with the ether, air, fire, water, earth, the combination of the body, with sound, touch, smell, taste and form, portfolio given to each whole differently, with the 5 senses of action, with the speech and holding and walking and reproducing and excreting, indriyas of the sense organs, chitta, the mind stuff, in which all Watergate tapes, all the previous karmas of not only this life but many, many, many millions of life, everything perfectly recorded by the most sensitive tape record is hidden in the subconscious, unconscious mind. What a package. Such a package is formed in the womb of the mother. With its exact shape of the physical body, that shape is already in an abstract form, outline of that, in the astral body. It is only above the astral body, the gross body is formed. Formation will not happen to everyone same way. Each one has different deficiencies. Who decides that? Our karma. If God decides that each one should have that type of deficiency or this type of deficiency, some are healthy, some are born constantly having problems, then if God does that, then God will be a partial God. But God is never partial. Therefore, who decides that, how the body should be? It is our karma which decides that. I know you are going to question me. Well, nowadays we have doctors. No matter what karma with the child having that deficiency, he can see it ahead and thereby make the necessary operation when the baby is in the womb of the mother and correct it. That is also karma, known as kriyamana karma. Law of karma decides that. That is why man, woman, short-lived, long-lived, all these things. Interesting point comes now. Very interesting. What is that? At the 7th month, people outside and body inside also, child's body feels the presence of the soul. Therefore, sometimes many religions and many people think that soul enters into the body at the 7th month. Because the instrument is getting perfect at that time, therefore the spirit, movement of the spirit is visible at that time. Therefore, they think soul has entered at that time, but it is not true. Soul enters along with this astral, causal, everything at the very inception. You have heard that. 8th month, 9th month, full growth, full manifestation of the limbs. Nurses and doctors give you promises that, oh, within 24 hours she is going to give birth to the baby. And mother also is expecting, doctor also is expecting, nurse also is expecting. When it's a time has come, it's a time. And the conjecture of the planets in a natural birth. We are whipped by a wind and really knocked out, you know. Yes. In that weightless liquid, this floating baby is pressed by, we call Sutika Vayu. That great wind is going to pressurize. So when the baby is coming out, immediately the prana here and the soul here, from this soft corner, from this soft spot which the baby carries for a few months there, the softness, it descends down to the heart level. I was astonished to see in the science that no moment, the very moment when the umbilical cord is cut off, that very moment the lung begins breathing independently, independent of the mother. The symbology and spirituality of the prana descending from the crown of the head to the heart.
Hey,
Wow.
Vikram, I mean, you know, when people say spirituality and science are opposites or they oppose each other, I don't see it that way. I mean, look at Guruji speaking about all this scientific stuff. You know, you recently had 2 kids, so you've been through this whole pregnancy phase with your wife and everything, and it's amazing how spiritualists can also tap into the science. And there's so much more detail and more known about this life that's developing inside the womb of a mom than the scientists can tell us or doctors can tell us about it.
Wow. I mean, I think one of the things that struck me is that, you know, you and I were talking about, I mean, you were talking about the body and the soul and then the different layers, right?
Yes.
But I think what I never thought about, which Guruji was mentioning, is that even within the structures of what we are, every piece of us also has its infinite identity. In that respect, you're even more layered as an entity, as part of this universe than even what we think. And I think that is a very fascinating realization, which I never thought about.
And also he touched on how the soul, and the Bhagavad Gita speaks about this, I believe, in chapter 3, where Krishna talks about how through the rain, the soul that's eligible for rebirth comes through the raindrops. And he didn't talk about this specifically, but this is what the Bhagavad Gita says, is that it comes through the soil, goes into the soil, comes through the vegetation or whatever is growing from the soil. And when that produce is consumed by that chosen parent, it manifests into their semen as a sperm cell. So that is the journey of the soul coming down through the ancestral realm, through the rain, and physically coming back to this earth. I mean, it's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Really.
this is a science that goes beyond
It's a
science, you know?
Right. It's a science.
Yeah, very, very deep science. So that brings us to the spotlight for this month. On May 25th, it was Ganga Dashera. So Ganga Dashera, which is a celebration of Ganga Devi, the goddess Ganga, who's known as the Ganges River or Ganga River. She descended from the heavens down to the earth. So, in honor of Ganga Dashera, Vikram, I believe you have the spotlight to share with us the story of the goddess Ganga.
Yeah, absolutely. She is known as Papanashini, meaning the destroyer of sin. And the way that she descended to the earth is quite a fascinating tale, and one that is quite legendary, as a matter of fact. So basically, there was a king, King Sagar, right? And he had 60,000 sons. So he decided to do the Ashwamedh Yagna.
Can you mention what that means exactly, Ashwamedha Yagya?
Yeah. So basically, the Ashwamedh Yagna, what it is it's a Vedic ritual, royal ritual that kings used to do to basically prove their sovereignty and power over the realm. There was a horse that was part of that, and that horse was symbolic of the king's power. And it was basically, it was set free to roam wherever it wanted to go. And there was basically a understanding that if this horse came and if the king, you know, wanted to challenge the other king that is conducting the Ashwamedh Yag, then he could. And but most of the time, if it was a very powerful king, then they would just let the horse go by. And if 1 year passed and there were no challenges, and king that was conducting the yagna, if he won these wars or if he didn't see any challenges, then he was considered to be, all powerful. And one thing that is not as known is after the horse would return after a year, it was sacrificed as a part of the yagna as well. And then that would declare that king as a undisputed emperor. So that's basically what the Ashwamedh Yagna was. So King Sagar was doing that, and the horse was, roaming here and there, and it ended up there was a rishi, a sage, Kapil, and the 60,000 sons chased the horse. They saw the horse there. They thought that the sage had taken the horse, and he was in meditation. And the sage was furious at his meditation being disturbed, and he opened his eyes, and all those 60,000 sons of King Sagar were burnt to ashes. King Sagar was devastated at finding this, and so he sought a solution. And the solution that came about, from Sage Kapil was that, well, if you can bring Ganga to earth, then she will purify the ashes of your sons, and they will achieve mukti. And this is the outcome that would be best. So King Sagar started the meditation to get goddess Ganga to earth, but it was such intense and long standing meditation that he was doing that he didn't survive it. He passed away. And so many generations later, King Bhagirath descended. He decided to go through the same thing. Bhagirath ultimately was successful in bringing goddess Ganga to earth so that his ancestors' souls could be liberated. The one interesting thing about Ganga's descent to earth was that her flow was so powerful that it would completely devastate the earth. So all the gods prayed to Lord Shiv to catch her in his locks so that her flow can be controlled a little bit. And that's exactly what happened. So, listeners, if you see photos of Lord Shiva and you see a stream of water coming from the top of his locks, that is goddess Ganga. And, when Ganga got here, she followed Bhagirath and her waters, were go everywhere. And it accidentally destroyed the hermitage of Sage Janu. And he was so upset that he drank the entire Ganga in one gulp. But when Bhagirath pleaded to him, the sage released her from his thigh, and she got another name, which is Janvi, because she came from Saint Janu's thigh, and because Bhagirath brought her to the earth, she's also known as Bhagirathi. And till this day, people go to Haridwar and they bathe in there to wash away their sins. Also, the ashes of those whom have passed away are also dispersed in the Ganga for purification. So, another thing I'll mention is her role is not only limited to this. I mean, she had played a crucial role in many other Puranic tales as well. Most notably, she is the mother of Bhishma
Yeah.
in the Mahabharata.
That's why he's called Ganga Putra Bhish.
That's why he's called Gangaputra Bhishma. Exactly, exactly. And she, I've heard other stories of, her involvement in certain things which people may not know. One example of this was the role that she played in the life of Bhakt Prahlad, which many people don't know. Many people think that it's primarily a Vishnu avatar story, but as a matter of fact, when Bhakt Prahlad's mother Kayadu was pregnant, the demon guru Shukracharya, he knew that Kayadu was pregnant with a child that would end up being a big Narayan Bhakt. So he, of course, viewed that as a devastating thing for the Asur race. So what he did is during Kayadu's baby shower, he put some poison into a juice that Kayadu was going to drink. When she drank it, goddess Ganga herself went inside the womb and consumed the poison, and thus helped protect Bhakt Prahlad. So this I thought may not know, so I wanted to share it.
I
So
didn't.
yeah. So
Amazing.
so she is, when you think of a mother, Goddess Ganga exemplifies that because she accepts everybody as her child. She is all forgiving because one dip in the Ganga, it washes away your sins. The purity of her, the forgiveness of her, the mercifulness of her is very much of what you associate with a mother, and that is what she is. So that's about Goddess Ganga.
Wonderful. I'd like to add one more thing, Vikram. You probably know this, but you may have forgotten, is she actually emanates from the foot of Lord Vishnu. Did you know that?
That's true. Yes. Yes.
So she actually...
Yes, absolutely true. Yes, I didn't mention that. Yes.
Yeah. So comes down, she comes down, her descent comes from his foot all the way down, and then Lord Shiva catches her, like you mentioned. So I'd like to actually also speak about the distance within India where she flows from the Gangotri Glacier in the western Himalayas of Uttarakhand, India, to the Bay of Bengal. So that's the distance that she flows, and it's a 1,569-mile journey that spans 2 countries and passes through several major geographical regions. So that gives people some interesting tidbits of the Ganga River as it is today. So thank you so much for that spotlight description on Ganga. And thank you, Vikram, for your contribution once again for this episode. And I'm really glad about the importance of us understanding our present birth in this world and, what the importance of being born as a human is, as I mentioned earlier. And there was so much science that was tied into this episode that I'm sure a lot of our listeners hopefully will find it interesting. And hopefully they'll learn something new out of it, or a lot new out of it, perhaps.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So I'd like to leave you guys with a continuation of, if you will, of the discourse that Guruji was giving. So with that, we'd like to wish all our listeners the very best. I hope you enjoyed this episode and continue listening and following us. Thank you so much. Om Shanti.
7th month, the manifestation of the soul, and 9th month, the soul is capable. Every one of us, while we were in the womb of the mother, we have heard the word of God and we have seen the light of Shiva. In the 9th month, the soul says many things. This is discussed in the sacred doctrine called Jnana Sindhu, which Shiva teaches the secret wisdom to Kartikeya, Subramanya. That Jivatma, the individual soul, prays, God, forgive me, my Lord. In endless births and deaths, I am able to see all my past lives while I am sitting here in this womb. All over the world, my tombs and cremation grounds are there. So many lives, so many bodies in evolutionary scheme I have gone through. I am able to see my past births now. Oh my Lord, please bless me with pure devotion. God, let me promise you that in this life I will be your devotee. I will seek shelter in the wisdom of the Guru. I will learn the true knowledge of our relationship of soul and God. My ego brought me in so many round of births. So, it is in renunciation that a man has everlasting life. Renunciation of what? Not wife and children, not office and business, not earth and home, but renunciation of ego. You can have everything. If you have conquered the ego, you are like Janaka Raja. I and mine, that is the cause of bondage. Soul's descent, ascent take place because of that. So the 9th month, constantly the soul is praying, Saku Sakinnu Samsara Dukha. Enough of this. God bless me with pure bhakti. May I serve you, sing your holy name all my life. Thus the soul, each one of us have promised God. No sooner we were born. See, that is the third birth now. First birth, descent, and thereby entering into that sperm. Second, entering into the womb of the mother. Now the third is after the growth of the body, you are born on earth. And people immediately begin writing the horoscope from that point, but there were other births before. Since that time, in every breath, the ego, just like a ball, you kick this way, that way, this way, that way. Like that, in every breath, the ego is tossed up and down, up and down. There's no wonder we become restless. You see, this is why the deep breathing brings you a lot of relaxation and rest. We learn that gradually. Because man's days are not counted by time, truly speaking, but by the count of breaths. And if that breath is reserved, maintained in a proper way to learn the truth, then that silken breath is the secret of leading you towards the truth within. That breath is Hanuman, and yourself is Rama. Through Hanuman, you reach Rama. Through breath, you reach the self. That is the secret of soul's descent with the network of karma. No sooner it is born here, immediately that Vishnu Maya comes and covers. And they say the air pressure outside causes the baby to cry. And inside it is the pressure of the Maya. Wonder is, most of the babies completely forget its promise given to God. Completely. Just like sometime you dream and in the morning you try to remember, you have completely forgotten. Certain times you remember a little bit of this, little bit of that. Maya, oh, mama Maya, duratyaya. That is the power of this Vishnu Maya. So how shall we conquer that? Only by singing His holy name, purifying our emotions, meditating on the true self, knowing that the life is a water bubble, which will break any time, and having vairagya, that is passion, knowing that things are going to change for everyone, all the time, including the body. Nothing is permanent here, including the entire creation, and permanent is truth or God alone. Therefore, to surrender to the Lord and do our best without ego is the secret of success, secret of bliss and peace in this very life.